Dr. Jeremiah, I took a look at your recent book, Where Do We Go From Here? And I'm actually going to read a little bit right from it because it immediately caught my attention and prompted trying to set up this interview. This is what you wrote. A deadly virus is quietly spreading throughout our nation. It is far more lethal than COVID-19, and most Americans are totally unaware of the threat that it poses to our freedom and way of life. So,
I was talking about socialism.
yes.
And it's true. And, I had some knowledge of it when I started to work on this project, but I actually studied socialism for a whole year. I read everything I could find, went back and went through the history of it, how it got started, and did an awful lot of work on Marx and what kind of a person he was. I read a book called The Devil and Karl Marx that was really scary. I mean, this is a very frightening thing that's happening in our country today. And as you mentioned, as I wrote, most people just don't even know it.
Well, and this is kind of an interesting question. You know, we're seeing this illiberal ideology. Some people call it wokeism. There's a cancel culture element developing. But as I also learned over the last several years of educating myself, this also does have roots in Marxism.
Yes, it does. In fact, just about every chapter in this book, in some way or another, goes back to things that I learned about socialism that are just a part of the overall ideology of the whole thing. And now, what is so amazing to me is because I've sensitized my mind and heart to all of this, every day on the news, I see vivid examples of what's happening and how it's affecting us as a nation.
What do you think is the most important thing that people need to know that they don't understand?
First of all, obviously, since I am a pastor, many people are surprised to discover that socialism is anti-God. It is not. Socialists don't believe that there is no God. They're not atheists. They're anti-God. In fact, Karl Marx was not anti-God. He was a cheerleader for the devil. And even the people that were close to him felt like he was demon-possessed. He came from a very dark place. And I wrote one place in the book, he was a hideous man, and socialism became the full bloom of him as a person.
That is something that a lot of people haven't heard about. I mean, you can read it in some of his poetry, for example. It's fascinating.
Yeah. He said in one place that he was born to God and now he knows he was chosen for hell. He considered himself totally beyond any hope of redemption, and so lived his life with a careless evil that is not producible in most other people that I've read.
So, and this is very interesting. I hadn't heard it framed this way. You're saying that it's explicitly, so Marx, okay, we can agree that Marx was anti-God, but of course, socialism has evolved since then and so forth. But you're saying that socialism is anti-God as we speak.
Yeah, one of his key phrases was to wipe God out of heaven and capitalists off the earth. That was his twofold. It was his twofold program, and it's really scary to me because I speak in colleges. I just got done speaking at a big university back east, and there's a lot of university students who were kind of captivated by this, and some of the statistics I cite in this book really bear that out, that young people between 18 and 25, I think 60-some% of them think socialism is cool, it's okay. More than anything else because of all the free stuff they get promised in the process. But when they understand the roots of socialism, it makes them stop and think. I wonder if the people who are champions of socialism really understand the poisonous foundation upon which it was founded. Karl Marx was a wicked man. He was a terrible person.
I want to sort of go back into this sort of how today, right? Today, and there's a lot of these young folks, like you said, I think it's something like 60% of people and the teenagers and so forth think this would be a good way to live. And but they're not, they're not necessarily explicitly anti-God. Do people know what they're really espousing?
And it is pretty profound when you say to a young person, you can't be a practicing Christian and a socialist because they're oil and water, they don't mix. How could you be an anti-God Christian? There's no such thing. So, and then, sometimes they like to cite passages in the Bible, like in the book of Acts, where they all held things together, but that wasn't socialism. That was just a bunch of Christians sharing what they had during a tough time. So there is no biblical basis whatsoever for socialism, either in the Old Testament or in the New Testament. People who claim that there is just haven't studied it. It's not true. Because socialism is totally at the opposite end of the spectrum from what it means to be a God-fearing person. There's no room for God in socialism. In fact, they believe the church is the opium of the masses. They do everything, because if the church is in a person's life, it takes away from the loyalty that they demand from their adherents.
So, in your book, I think the first chapter is about socialism. There's kind of elements of this throughout, actually. But you talk quite a bit about, I guess you call it cancel culture, right? But you see this as something like an extension of that system.
Yes, because one of the key ingredients of socialism, Jan, is that it is totalitarianism. It is, we would say it today, my way or the highway. There's only one viewpoint. There's no room for any other viewpoint. Socialism can't stand the light of contrary discussion, because it doesn't have any ground to stand on. And so the way they deal with that is they just black out everything other than their own view. And we're seeing that in our country today. And I remember one night I was working on this project, and I watched something on television where, you may have remembered this, there was a school, I think it was in Virginia, where they were going to disavow all of the holidays. They were going to take all the names of the holidays off and just call them student vacations or something. And they had a volatile parents meeting, and a parent got up to disagree, and the moderator slammed his fist on the table and said, "This is not a debate." And the meeting was done. That is as clear an illustration as I can see. If there's no room for discussion, if there's no room for disagreement, if there's no room for going back and forth and trying to understand each other, you've lost society altogether. What you have is a dictatorship. And totalitarianism is a building block of socialism that is very much a part of the culture cancer. Cancer is a good word for it. The culture of canceling everything that you don't agree with.
So, what do you think about that a school board chair or member basically saying, sorry, there's no debate, parents? What do you think about that?
Well, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he left Russia after he'd been there and in the Gulag, before he left, he gave a speech. And the speech was titled, "Live Not by Lies." And the first point in his speech was, you cannot allow yourself to live by lies. You may not be able to champion the truth, but you can refuse to live by lies. And that's what I think has to happen among American people. They can't allow themselves to go to a board meeting where there is no truth, because the truth has been lost in the woke culture of the leadership. They cannot do that. They have to stand up for the truth, and the truth is there somewhere. It is not just his idea. The chairman is being programmed by the ideology of socialism. If there's no way to push back on that, you've lost the game already. So cancel culture is a wicked thing. Interestingly enough, I gave a speech about that at this university back east, and there was a railing down in front. There was 13,000 kids in this event, and this girl came down, and she was in tears, and she said, "My dad got canceled last week." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "He's a very well-known surgeon here in this area, and my mom is a very strong evangelical, and she loves God, and she posted some very positive things about Jesus on her website, and his partners saw it, and they got together and decided they don't want him in their group anymore, and they fired him. They just said, we don't need this religious stuff here, we don't need this," and so they just got together and disavowed their relationship with him, and she was in tears. Her sister came up later, and they were just saying, "We're going to get through this, but don't tell me there isn't such a thing as cancel culture. My daddy got canceled." And that's happening across. People are really reticent to put anything in writing, to say anything that could get them in trouble. I tell the kids in our school all the time, you may think it's fun to mess around on your internet sites and all of that, but just remember that stuff doesn't ever go away. And don't put anything in there you don't want to come back and get in trouble for later. It's a whole different world.
But wait, so you're telling me that this surgeon basically got canceled out of the partnership he had
Yeah,
because his wife, in a personal capacity, posted
exactly.
something religious?
They were so opposed to anything religious and so opposed to Christianity